everybody. Welcome to Bro Op Episode 2. My co-host from last time has joined me, Jim DeVolis. I am Michael Yaschak, and I just wanted to thank you guys for listening in again. Today's topic is going to be the evolution of video games. When I was younger, I remember playing Pong on my Atari. I think it was an Atari 64 or something like that, something ridiculous, because I am a few years older than you are. It was a joystick with one button, and then there was another one that had like a dial to move back and forth for the Pong game. It's pretty hilarious, considering that today's controllers are, how many buttons are on that thing? Like 12 buttons are on that thing, and that's considered a normal controller. So what was your first experience with video games, Jimbo?
I hopped into the console generation at the first Nintendo. Started with the Mario Brothers. I remember being like 7 or 8 and learning how to basically beat Mario 1 within 5.5 minutes. And then right after that moved right into the Super Nintendo generation. But yeah, those two were my first consoles really, and Mario was a pretty much staple in my life for like frickin' ever.
I played Super Mario Brothers as well, but what really stuck with me from Nintendo, from NES, was Castlevania. I remember playing Castlevania. I would play it for hours.
Great game.
Hours. Yes, very, very good game. And actually, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which came out in the late 90s, is now available on Xbox Live Arcade, in case you might want to check that out, just FYI. Awesome game. And then there was the Super Nintendo. Did you get that?
Oh yeah. SNES was my system. I mean, that's where you brought in probably one of the best franchises, which was Donkey Kong. And I think that was designed by Raresoft, who turned out to be really successful with Nintendo for years, which was really the only console that I played. I didn't ever transition to the PlayStation or Xbox. I was console and Macintosh. I was Macintosh before it was cool to be Macintosh, bro. But yeah, Donkey Kong is one of the staple video games from my childhood, one of the best side-scrollers they ever did.
Specifically, you mean Donkey Kong Country, right?
Yes, Donkey Kong Country, not the 8-bit Donkey Kong from Nintendo where, yeah, you were jumping up the ladders, but fairly played.
I'm just saying. Because, I don't know if our audience is going to know exactly what you're talking about, although they should. You should.
Donkey Kong is a classic.
Sorry.
You should.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so aggressive about it. Anyway. But yeah, so you didn't have Genesis.
No, Genesis was something that I played over my friends' houses. When I beat Sonic the Hedgehog, it was beating it with them in their basements, like, little kids playing Sega all day while the other kids were out swimming. Sega was great, but Sonic was the best.
Remember Shinobi?
I have no idea what that game is.
Oh, Shinobi, it's like a ninja game. It was, rather than like Ninja Gaiden, you were like Shinobi, and he was like white. He had like a white outfit rather than the black one. Pretty much the same thing, but very, very good game. Very, very good game for being a ninja and jumping around and like wall jumping and all that other good shit.
Now, you can't talk about video game evolution without mentioning probably the granddaddies of them all, because I mean, up until this time, you had 8 and 16-bit side scrollers, and then you move into where PCs just said, "Hey, here's a first-person shooter." And you got your Wolfensteins, you got your Doom, you got your Duke Nukem. We're talking crass, we're talking dirty, we're talking blood, guts, and glory, and we're talking guns. It was fun, and those games are really the grandfathers of some of our modern warfares and stuff like that. I mean, our soldiers trained to these video games now.
Yes. Actually, speaking of soldiers being trained with video games, Arma 2, the Arma series, that's why it was created, was to train soldiers.
Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely insane, but video games have transcended the recreational.
Yeah, that is true. There's actually been a few videos I've watched in my class where they've been using virtual reality setups to try to make people relive certain aspects of their life, like traumatized soldiers and whatnot, just to help them like deal with their PTSD, I think it's called, right? So we're talking about Arma, and then we can move back a little bit with the PC. I remember going from consoles to PC, and I played PC probably from the early 90s to the late 90s.
Same here.
And then at that point it came back to consoles, and I never owned a PlayStation. I only ever borrowed it from my friends. But I remember Battle Arena to Shinden. Like, Battle Arena to Shinden was probably one of the best fighting games I've ever played in my life. And then there was Virtua Fighter as well, which was in the arcade. And then when it finally came home, to a home console, it was just, an orgasm for the eyes, not to be like crude or anything.
Well, you can't bring up PlayStation without bringing up. I mean, hey, listen, I'll sound like a fanboy. I don't care, because you cannot ignore Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, and I mean, even going beyond that, but those 3 games were amazing. I mean, you always had that style of game. I mean, going back to Nintendo days and Game Boy days, you had Dragon Warrior, which was a fantastic series 1 through 4, and then continued further in Japan. And it was brought back for the PlayStation for 7 and I believe up to 9 at this point. But Final Fantasy is a game, for years you had games that you played and beat within 45 minutes to 4 hours, depending on how big of the battery was inside of the cartridge that saved it. Along comes PlayStation, Final Fantasy 4 PlayStation, and 7 in particular was 40 hours of content across 4 discs. It was the first game that you didn't play and put away. You played and played and played, because 40 hours of content and about another 40 hours of side content. It was really, in my opinion, one of the very first hugely expansive and graphically beautiful games.
I'm going to blow your mind. I played Final Fantasy VII on the PC.
I am jealous because I'm not a console fan, because again, the evolution of the paddle. You bring that up from earlier with Atari, where you had a little knob and a joystick. And then you go to Nintendo, which I believe was only 2 AB and a crossbar. Then you go to Super Nintendo, which was a crossbar, a left bar, a right bar, and you had 4 XY AB. Fine. I was cool with the Super Nintendo. Then you get to PlayStation and Xbox, and now you've got 15 frickin' buttons to be considered good. And I can't do it anymore. Just give me a plain old-fashioned QWERTY keyboard with a spacebar and a mouse. Clicker till I die, bro.
Yeah. I definitely like using a keyboard and mouse. I find that there's a lot more control with that, especially with first-person shooters. So, we talked about Atari and Nintendo and PlayStation and sort of PS2, because that's what I played Dragon Warrior 8 on. And, oh, by the way, the Dreamcast. We can't forget about the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast, I want to say, was like the red-headed stepchild of the Xbox and PS2 generation in between Xbox 360 and PS3. Because it came out sort of in the middle of that, and then it just died. But all the games that came out for it were amazing. Like Power Stone, one of the best fighting games I've ever played. And then there was Sonic Adventure, which was like almost like a Final Fantasy game. There were a lot, like 40 hours of content in that game. Do you remember the Dreamcast?
I remember the Dreamcast, and some people may argue how I feel about it is this. It was ahead of its time, just a little too late. It was good. Its games were good. It was trying to went into the disc realm. It was right before PlayStation, if I'm not mistaken. And PlayStation came out and was just better.
Yeah. It
was just better. And it killed it. But Dreamcast, it's a shame what happened to it.
Dreamcast was the first console that had an Ethernet plug.
Yes.
For multiplayer. I don't think PlayStation 2 had that until like Slim came out. So
yep.
It was just it's interesting. At this point in our conversation is where we're talking about multiplayer. So the evolution of gaming has come from a lot of single player experiences to on the couch co-op or on the couch versus to now we're talking about multiplayer across the world pretty much. And I think PC has had a lot to do with that because a lot of people were like, well, all these PC gamers are, can just play their games, online and they can do this with their friends and this and that and other thing. Like you have the Warcrafts and the Starcrafts and things like that in the early 2000s, which, a lot of people were playing that multiplayer. And finally we're at the point today where on a console we're having 64 versus 64 Battlefield 3 matches. What's your opinion and thoughts on how multiplayer has evolved?
It's interesting. You really can't bring up multiplayer without bringing up one of the most evolutionary things that took place in gaming, and that was the advent of Battle.net. You gotta hand it to Blizzard. They figured out a way to bring multiple people together for the cost of just paying for your internet in the game to enjoy the games that they developed. There was other multiplayer systems before this, but none were so socially inviting. Tons of people from around the world, around the globe that you didn't have to know. And that has evolved to a point now, especially through the advent of DRM, I think I'm saying that one right, where now you can't even buy a single player game you don't even buy physical copies anymore. And with that software copy that you buy, you're usually also plugged into a system of achievements worldwide. So even if you're playing your game alone, there's still a sliver of multiplayer competition, at least. It's really fantastic. Blizzard should really be blamed for a lot of that. They did it incredibly well at that.
And Battle.net came out specifically for Diablo 2, or was it Diablo 1?
Diablo 1 had Battle.net, Warcraft 2 had Battle.net, and I can't remember which one came out first. I actually want to say it was WC2 that came out before D1.
Okay. I wasn't sure of the timeline for the Battle.net. But yeah, it's still used today, 2013. You sign in your Battle.net account to play the devil that is World of Warcraft.
Well, that was the best change they made, was just unifying Battle.net in general, but you can still, if you can get on it, if you still can play it on some of these modern computers, Warcraft 2 and Diablo still have Battle.net running to this day. Diablo 2 still has a very active Diablo community. Granted, a lot of it is trolls, spammers, and hackers, but you can still play that game, host a game, and have it fill up with people to its maximum. And that game is old. All these games are old, but they're still played. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah, quality games, and a quality experience and a quality story.
Yeah, there is really, in my opinion at least, there is no single player game left. There's very few of them are done. Most of them are indie games, which I find to be an up and coming industry for sure, and that could be a subject of a later subject, who knows, but topic, yeah, I don't know, you're gonna have to edit that part out. But
okay, so now we're experiencing a bunch of brain farts because this podcast has rolled over about 3.5 minutes past the time it was supposed to end. So at this point, I'm going to say that video games have evolved from, 2 bars and a dot that goes side to side on a screen, meaning Pong, to Nintendo with Mario, to Super Nintendo, to Sega Genesis, Master System, PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, Xbox 360, PS3, and the master race, as far as I'm concerned, PC gaming. I just want to wrap this up and say that no matter what game system you play on, at least you're playing some games, and keep on playing those games, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. This is Mike Yaschak, your host of Bro Op, with my co-host, Jim DeVolis. Thank you again so much for your time, and don't worry, I will edit out all those brain farts that we both had, but I'm going to keep this one in. Catch you guys later. Keep on playing your games.